So today we're learning Igeres HaKodesh 19, of the sacred letters, letter 19, and we're on page 256. Yeah, 256. Just to recap, Dalfin Rebbe begins with a verse in Tehillim, I think 104. Baruch Nafshi. It's Baruch Nafshi. Oita Erka Salma, that HaKodesh Baruch Hu wraps himself with a garment, and Dalfin Rebbe says that David HaMelech is saying that HaKodesh Baruch Hu gave us a Torah, and the Torah is the garment for God. In Tanya here, Dalfin Rebbe takes that verse and he looks at something much broader. And that is that there seems to be a puzzling statement by the Arizal, which the Arizal says that the Kabbalists, they understood, they knew more about God than the prophets, than Moshe Rabbeinu, which of course is a very puzzling statement. And his answer to that remark, the Alter Rebbe's explanation, is that it's two separate levels. The Arizal speaking about one level, and his reference to Moshe Rabbeinu and the prophets is another level. What's the difference? The difference is between seeing in God, having such clarity of Hashem, like seeing something, versus just comprehending something. And when it comes to comprehension, you're able to comprehend higher levels, but it's only comprehension. It's only seichel. And regardless of what level of seichel, and he mentions many different levels, but at the end of the day, it's an intellectual process. So the intellectual process is able to grasp higher aspects of God. That's why the Kabbalists, who used not only their intellect, but their intuition and Kabbalah and all that, they were able to talk about higher levels. But they didn't see them. Whereas Moshe Rabbeinu and the prophets, they had re'iyah, they had seeing in lower levels. So in other words, the Kabbalists didn't have seeing in any levels. Okay? So therefore, to say that the Kabbalists are higher than Moshe and the prophets is wrong, and to say that the Kabbalists are higher than the Kabbalists, the Moshe Rabbeinu, the prophets are higher than the Kabbalists, is also wrong. It's two separate things. It's like I said yesterday, you're talking about apples and oranges. It's two separate things. That's the way the Baal HaTanya here reconciles this issue. So now let's go to 256 and we're in the middle of the page where he talks about in the terminology that he uses here in Tanya, is that Moshe Rabbeinu's comprehension was in the hymn, Netzach Hod Yesod Malchus, the lower aspect of the spheros. And he says that that's also known as Maisa, action. And he explains that now. Let's look. It's here. The fifth line. The fourth line at the end, he says, "V'nikra gam kein b'chinas asiyah shebatzilas." This is also called Asiya within Atzilus, right? The world of Atzilus is the highest world of the four worlds. Within each world, you have an element of the other world. So you have Bria within Atzilus, Yesida within Atzilus, and Asiya. In other words, the potent force is Atzilus. But within it, you have Bria, Yesida, and Asiya. And so too in each of the four. So it's like 4 times 4, 16. Just like the idea of the 10 spheres with the 7 spheres with spheres ha'omer, Chochmah shebechesed, shebechesed, etc. So too with the 4 olamas. And just to bring it down, because it's very Kabbalistic, Atzilus is the world of Achdus, the world of fusion with God, Achdus. Bria is the beginning of Yesh, Hascholas HaYesh, like the Ramban says on Bereshis. Yetzirah is already the formation of Yesh, or in the language of Chabad Chassidus, the Midos, the Zeir Ampin. And Asiya is not Asiya Gashmi, it's Asiya Ruchnius. It's the spiritual idea of Asiya. It's where the beginning of Gashmius, of the world of Asiya, is now a legitimate idea. So you have these 4 components within each other. Okay? So in the world of Achdus, which is the world of Atzilus, right? So there is the way Achdus is pure Achdus, pure unity. Then there is the way Achdus lends itself to the beginning of Yesh, but within Achdus. And then there is Midos within Achdus, and there's Asiya within Achdus. Okay, it's such an idea. How to kind of give the psychological applications for that is another discussion, another study. And if you're ever interested, Rabbi Matis Cantor wrote a book, the 10 Keys to Understanding, in which he does some of that there, and it's fascinating. But let's go back to the text. So now he says, Pirush, we're on page 256, the 5th line. Pirush al derech moshel commission b'adam hatacht, and just like by the human being below. Sheyesh b'nishma say hey madrega zu l'mata mizu. He has 5 levels, one below the other. Shem pchinas haseichel. Okay, here we go. Number 1, seichel, intelligence. V'hamida is number 2, emotions. Umachshava, in thought. 3, v'dibur, number 4, speech. Umaisa, in action. V'hamaisa, an action. Hiya tachtoina shebekulam is the lowest from the all 5. Shachayis hamashpashit manashamo malubish b'koyach hamaisa, because the energy that comes from the soul that's invested in action, who ka'ayin, it's like naught, it's like nothing. L'gabi achayis hamashpashit mimenu malubish b'koyach hadibur. Right? Velvu. When someone does something, you do it, and you don't have to necessarily see that it's animated. It's done. You don't know, right? So in other words, when you speak, I'm speaking now. You guys hear me. Okay, you hear me in a certain way. There's a certain animation. This way, that way. So in other words, the Chayis is more visible in Dibur than it is in Maisa. Okay, so this can be understood. This isn't Kabbalah, this is Chassidus. It's very simple. Maisa action is flat, is silent, is dormant. When you insert Dibur within Maisa, and you insert Machshava within Maisa, then the Maisa becomes animated. But here we're making the comparison between Maisa Asiya on its own, right, compared to Dibur. So that's why the Alter Rebbe says, when the Chai is coming, when the energy coming from the Nefesh into Maisa, it's such a Chayis that lends itself to the world of Maisa, which is silent. The action is done, but you don't know you don't know much about it. It doesn't tell you who did it, how he did it, and all of that. When it comes to speaking about the action, speaking about it, you see more life force there, because the person, as it says, Nafshay yotza bedabroi. The person's nefesh comes forth through his speech. Someone who speaks like a vulgar, with vulgarities, it tells you much about that person. Someone who speaks with edelkeit and refinement, it tells you much about that person. Let's continue. And then he says, that's why he says it's ka'ayin. If you compare the chayas within Maisa to the chayas within Dibur, the chayas of within Maisa is like naught. Is ka'ayin legabe chayas hamaspashim menu mulubish b'machshava u'midas v'seichel. And if you go back, if you compare the chayas within Dibur to the chayas of machshava, it's also like naught. Why? Because the chayas within machshava, thought, Dibur compared to thought, is also ayin. And if you go back further, the chayas of machshava compared to the chayas of midos, the midos are emotions. And if you go back further, the seichel, that's the line of thinking that he's using here. This is the mashal. And now comes the moral. Kein al derech zeh mamish, he b'chinas chochmasi is barich, so too regarding the Eibishter's Hashem's wisdom, masha yuchel is pasha v'menu lashbiel is slabish b'tachtoinim, Hashem's hashpo, Hashem's effluence, that impacts us below, kulam heim, they're all ka'ayin legabe b'chinas ponim hamiyuched b'maitzel baruch hu. If you compare that to the face, to the ponim, to the pnimius of the emanator, the maitzel, the kula kamek kelechoshev, they're all before him as naught. And the effluence that's given to creatures, which are all limited, nechsheves yerida, is considered a descent, v'tzimtzum kaviyochel legabe ha'maitzel esav baruch hu, in comparison to the emanator, to the maitzel. Al derech moshel k'moish nechsheves yeridas v'tzimtzum l'seichel ha'adam, just as it's considered a descent when it comes into man's mind. Hamaskil ha'metzumtzum be'ezah siya gashmis v'chumnis mamish. You take this idea, and this idea is goes now what? It goes into some geshem, to asiya. Over there in asiya, it's not noticeable. The animation, the emotion, the intelligence is not noticeable in the asiya. With this mashal, the Alter Rebbe explains. Look, he explains. He comes. Moshe Rabbeinu, who comprehended till the backside of Chochmah, Zocha, he merited Shetinosin al Yodei HaTorah, that the Torah was given specifically through Moshe Rabbeinu. Shehi Noivlis Chochmah. This is the droppings of Chochmah Shelamayla. Pirush explains. Masher Noivel Mimena. It what comes from Torah. The Yored Lamata, and descends below. Mislabish b'Torah Gashmias Shelonu, and it invests itself in the physical to our Torah. Sheikre v'tachlisahu. The primary aspect of Torah is Kiyam Mitzvos lo sesei, the fulfillment of negative commandments, v'aseh, and b'poil, u'maiseh mamish, in actuality. K'maimer hayom lasois. Today is the time to do it. Another quote: "V'godel Talmud shemevid le'maiseh," and great is Talmud that leads to action. V'haloimid, and the Gemara says also, "V'haloimid shelei lases noach lo shel yosei." Someone who learns Torah and has a mind not to do it. A scholar at Harvard, lahavdil, a pope. And they don't. It's just an intellectual thing. It's such great idea, Talmud, but has no intent of lasosoi. The Gemara says, Nebchashil Yosei, his inner kishka should turn upside down, like he should be cursed from that. That's the purpose of learning Torah. The Chol Adam. Now the last line here is very important. Everything's important, but this. The Chol Adam Muchrech is Galgel. Every person is forced to be reincarnated, Achi Yekayim Kol Atarik Mitzvahs B'Poel till fulfill the 630 mitzvahs in actuality, Mabish K'neidim Arizal. So Velvel, of course, they asked the question, what about mitzvahs that are not shaykh to call every yid, only to Kohanim and Yisraelim? So there's two answers. One is we're not talking about that. And number two, Taka, if you make it possible for a Kohen and Levi to do their mitzvahs, you get some of that credit. But the Nekud Klolis is, the main idea is that, yes, we have to look to do all mitzvahs. And if we don't, then there'll be Gilgul. So like I told you, when I was in Eretz Yisrael once at my daughter's apartment, there was a mother bird, when I did Shiluach HaKan. Yeah, so yes, you should endeavor to do the mitzvah Shiluach HaKan if you can, because that's a mitzvah for everyone. And same with having children. Many Arizal talks about these things, but it's very serious business in the Arizal when he talks about the idea of Gilgul being Galgul to be able to do Kol Taryag mitzvahs. So the Alter Rebbe brings it over here to emphasize, Yoni, how important Maisa is, to bring it down. Let's continue now. Now on Kuf Chav Tes, on page Kuf Chav Tes, this was not in the original Igeres HaKodesh. In 1900, when the Chassid Rab Osher Grossman was appointed by the Rashab to re-edit the Tanya, because there were quite a few mistakes. So Rab Osher Grossman, he put this letter in. I guess he had it from a certain manuscript, I'm not sure, but and since that Tanya, which the Rashab established in 1900, the Tanya that we use today, it's included. Here, the Alter Rebbe is going to speak about another idea, but it has to do with the same idea of Netzach Chod Yesod that we spoke about in the beginning. Let's see what he says. Ha'oisis ha'niglos lanu. The letters that we use in the Torah, Heim b'maisa, Dibur machshava would be an action, speech, or right. The letters that are used to contain the godly force, to vivify, energize action, speech, and thought. The Maisa hein tmunas ha'oisis shebiksav ashuri shebesefer Torah. What's considered the Maisa of letters? It's the actual script in the Torah, Ksav Ashuris. You hear that? Yoni, the Ksav Ashuris, when you open up the Torah scroll, next time you get an Aliyah, that's called Ksav Ashuris. That's the Maisa. V'oisis HaDibur, the letters of Dibur, Nechkokois Behevel, are engraved in the sound, in the air, the coil. HaMeschalik L'chof Beis Chalokim, the void, the sound that's divided into 22 parts, Shainim, Zeh Mizeh, one different than the other, but Tzirosan in their letters. Aleph, Beis, Velvel, the Isser, Gimel, all of them are coming from different gutturals, right? So all of that, those 22 sounds vis-a-vis the 22 letters of the Aleph Beis are what we call the Dibur. The Dibur. Shehi Havodas Umifta, this is the expression of the 20 Achov Beis B'choloshin in any language. Ki ein hefrish bein Loshen HaKodesh u'bein Shar Lashonis b'muhus Havodas Oasis Kim B'tzirufan. This is an interesting point. Is there a difference between the 22 letters used in Hebrew, English, French, Arabic? No. As far as the sounds, no. The language which we use are expressing the same 22 havaros, the same 22. The difference is bitzirufa, how they're combined. Each language has a different way of combining letters. So that's as far as Oisiyos Hadibur. Now he goes to Oisiyos HaMachshava, the letters of thought. When you think, Yoni, you're also thinking in words. So there are letters within thought that are used to think your thought. So he says, he says, in every language, you think in a certain way with words. But again, using those 22 letters. Rak. But in thought, there are three types of oisius. When you look into a Torah, you see the image of the oisius, of the letters. They become formed in your thought. This is what we call action within machshava. In other words, you're thinking about it, but how are you thinking about it? Through seeing the letters. That's the action within machshava. When you hear someone speaking and you hear the words being used, they're also impressed within your thought, and you think about them. This is called the speech within thought, which is the level of Yitzira, meaning that there is Oisiyos HaMachshava and there's Oisiyos HaDibur. So he says, when you hear someone, you're identifying with the Dibur because you hear their words. That's called Dibur Shem Machshava. For Oisiyos HaMachshava Levado, then there's the third stage, pure thought. Beli hirur Oisiyos HaDibur, without thinking about the words and letters being used in thought. Nikreb Machshava Shem Machshava. That's already called thought within thought. And in Olam Oisi it would be the level of Bria, Pchinas Bria. Vehine. Oisiyos HaDibur Mamish. The actual usage of words, hein mishavois umikablois chayusam. They are created and they receive their vitality mi oisius elu atzer, from these very words shebe machshava, within thought. Here's a question. If you're telling me that my speech, my talking, my dibur is directly associated with machshava, how can it be that sometimes we speak one thing and we're thinking about something else? That's a question. Sometimes a person speaks, but at the very same time, he's thinking about something else. Answers the Alter Rebbe, what is he speaking? He's speaking things that he already thought about in the past. You can't, in other words, he can't speak now new things. He's speaking about things that he already thought about in the past, and now he's articulating them in words. So he's able to now think about something else and say something else simultaneously. But really, what he's speaking isn't new. It's already from a previous time that he spoke and he thought about it. That's what he says. There were many times in his thought in the past, and they remained in words and combinations, elu harashimu, these impressions that were made once mamachshava shenichtasa behem pomerabis, from the thought that he entered, that he went into many times. In other words, when you think about it, here, this is the point, this you think about something, that thought leaves an impression in your brain, and later on can express itself in dibur, but it's not new. It's from a previous idea. This is how he connects it to the previous part of this letter. And this is what we call the backside and the external of Netzach HaYesod, Mipartzu for Elyon, from the upper face, Shenichnas betachton, that enters the lower, Liyos leibkinas moichin v'chayas kadoida, to become its intelligence and its vitality as is known. So in other words, the point being here that the Alter Rebbe says, and what he wants here, I guess, is to show us that this aspect that Moshe Rabbeinu understood, the Nehim, the lower part of Chochmah, has an application to every one of us too. That there is sometimes when we speak, when it sounds like we're just speaking, but really it's coming from a higher place called machshava. But within machshava, there's three aspects, and it's the lower of the three. I think that's what he's saying. Yes, Yoni.
So in Hebrew, it really makes sense, because if you use the word, let's say, ani aseh, right? I'm going to do. So the aleph is the emphasis on the aleph, that you will do, I will do, on the action.
Okay, so what's your point? I'm not following. Okay, and therefore?
So therefore, like what you're saying is that the words have an impact. If you're going to say something, you're going to do it. It's not just saying something, words. There is something about the action, about it in the letters. Because if I'm saying ani aseh, I'm going to do it, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to do it. I'm not going to be just thinking about it.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to go out and do it.
Yeah. I hear you. Okay, the next chapter.
In Hebrew, in Lashon Kodesh, in Hebrew, it makes sense.
Right.
In English, you don't have that. It's the Hebrew itself.
Right. Now, tomorrow we'll start the next chapter. It's a very, very long one, but it's a very famous one, and I'll tell you more about it tomorrow. Igeres HaKodesh. Have a great day, everyone. We'll see everyone tomorrow. Zagazan. Take care.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.